Welcome to the Wild Ride podcast with Manny, Navarro, and some other guy.
Roddy, I'm not technologically savvy, brother, but I'm trying my best here.
Hey,
How
look,
was that?
that was phenomenal. It was great. I just love that I'm some other guy, and I love the intro. I love it's all fancy. Good stuff, man.
Yeah. Trying to expand the podcast this year, so I appreciate you coming on. I'm Manny Navarro of The Athletic. He's Roddy Jones, one of the best analysts in college football over at ESPN, and I'm glad that we could record this episode together because we're both busy guys. I just came home from Nashville. I was at that recruiting symposium. Spent all this time talking to people who are involved in the ever-changing landscape of college football with rev share and roster building, GMs, agents. I mean, this has become professional sports, Roddy. And you're busy on the road with the ACC Road Trip down in Miami on Monday, so you got to spend time with Mario Cristobal at practice. I haven't been to practice since last Friday. You've been at practice more than I have, so thanks for coming on, dude, and doing this with me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, man. I cannot wait to read the article about this recruiting symposium because recruiting, man, it nowadays, and I don't want to derail us too much, but it's so much different than it ever has been. And yes, it's because of the money, but it's also because of the professionalization of it all. Like guys have representatives and agents starting in high school. And so I just can't imagine the conversations being had at the kitchen table now about what school you're going to pick. Like, is it purely, hey, this school's offering X and this school's offering X minus, 100,000, or is there more to it? Is the agent at the dinner? It's just all so fascinating to me.
It really is, and people don't realize like just the rev share deal how much it's complicated things because teams have
Yeah.
salary caps now, and conversations were had about dead money. Do you sign guys to 1 year, 2 year deals? Do you include escalators in contracts, like in case guys reach certain benchmarks? How does that affect you if the kid all of a sudden decides he wants to enter the transfer portal and leave?
Right.
So I mean, these are all very intense professional sports type conversations, and yet this is what Mario Cristobal is dealing with as he's trying to pull Miami up and win the ACC finally and get to the college football playoff. So it's a much more complicated thing than just, hey, we want the best players, come play for us. It's so much more involved, and it really makes things tricky, Roddy. And that's why I'm so glad that I'm able to work at a place like the Athletic. And there's great places out there like ESPN that cover this sport in so many different facets. And so but you and I are here to talk college football, to talk about your trip to Miami, your impressions, and the ACC. So let's start with your trip to Miami. First of all, you've seen this Canes program plenty the last few years. Did anything grab you? I mean, it's life post Cam Ward. So, I mean, look, they're pretty good with Cam Ward. I'm just curious what your takeaways were leaving Coral Gables this week.
I wondered about the leadership, to be honest with you, because Cam Ward was, as Mario Cristobal called him from the second he walked on campus, an alpha dog. Like he was an alpha, a leader of men, and an alpha among alphas. How many times can I say alpha in a sentence? But he was the guy that everyone followed. So I wondered what that was going to be like with Carson Beck, and it is not the same. It's a different vibe, but it is there's just as much respect there because the guy has played so much ball. I mean, he's thrown for over 7,000 yards in his career. He comes from a program that is at the level, or has been at the level, that Miami wants to get to. Cam Ward sort of reflected Miami's build, I think. A guy who's still trying to prove himself, a guy who is trying to elevate himself in the way that Miami is. Carson Beck brings, I think, almost a validation that Miami not only is on the right track, but Miami's going the right way. Like Miami is almost there, and he provides that last little thing, or he could provide that last little thing of, hey, this, maybe not directly saying this is how we did it at Georgia, but if he's in a workout or he's in a drill or he's in something and it's not up to the standard that he's used to seeing at the University of Georgia, he knows that ain't gonna cut it to get to and win games in a college football playoff. And so the guys certainly respect him. Tremendous command of the offense. There's such a comfort with him. And I hadn't talked to Carson when he was at Georgia, but I can't imagine he was as comfortable as he is now, just as a person, with the place that he is. So that was the biggest thing. The other thing, Manny, is the offensive line. I mean, that group, I think is going to drive the bus of that team. It seems to set the tone of that team. And I was thoroughly impressed at their work ethic. And obviously everybody knows CC Maui Noah. But Markel Bell, was impressive to me. Jake Brockheimer was incredibly impressive just by the way that he both interacted with Carson, but his play, his quickness, his tenacity was tremendous. So I came away very, very impressed.
Now, look, offensively, you got Shannon Dawson going into year 3. You've got Mark Fletcher in the backfield. You've got Jordan Lyle, who was a big home run hitter whenever he was in the game last year. You've got some talent in Elijah Arroyo that, to me, I look at that guy and I think of the tight end who just won in the first round out of Penn State because he can line up anywhere on the field, much the same way that guy did at Penn State. So there's plenty of talent. Receiver, yes, it's unproven, but you've got some guys that were, coming over from other programs. I'm not really that concerned about the offense. You have continuity. You've got Carson Beck, all those reasons. The reason Miami didn't make the college football playoff last year was defense. And Corey Heatherman has come in here. Greg Schiano disciple. We know how much Mario loves Greg Schiano and respects him. He did a phenomenal job in his one season at Minnesota. I mean, the leaps that defense made in one season to the next, they were top 10 in a lot of categories. That's the reason Miami didn't make the playoffs last year. They didn't have a defense that played at the same level. What were your impressions on that side of the ball? Did you get a chance to see the new DBs? Did anybody stand out to you on that side?
I did. I was impressed, and I've actually covered Corey Heatherman since he was at Maine.
Oh, wow.
I did a Maine Weber State FCS game in 2018 where he was the defensive coordinator, and Weber State came in with one of the best offenses in the country and a great quarterback for that level. And Maine shut him down. They ended up scoring 3 touchdowns, but the last one was literally as the buzzer expired when Maine was up by, I think, 17 points. So I got a chance to see him then and was impressed with his defense. But now I think that defense, we didn't get to see the whole complement. There were a couple guys that were in non-contact jerseys. I was told because they needed to be in non-contact jerseys so that they could operate properly. So there were a couple guys that were there. But I was impressed. Some guys that stood out, obviously the headliners, Ruben Bain stood out. Akeem Mesidor stood out. Like those guys are tremendous athletes. I was impressed with Mesidor's movement. I was impressed with Ruben Bain all around. But after practice, and I was told he does this every day, he stayed for about 30 minutes, him and Jason Taylor, working on a sled, just working on his punch, working on his first step. And that type of dedication for a guy who's projected to go in the first round, I think bodes well for Miami and is scary for the rest of the ACC because I've seen first rounders that, like, once they're done, I'm out. Like, I'm good. I'm going to be good this year. But a guy who stays that long and is that detailed in his post-practice work was tremendously impressive. In terms of the defensive backs, I was impressed by a couple of guys. Zachariah Poisner. Z, as they call him.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with him. He made some plays in the backfield, triggering down from the safety position, where he's gonna be a ball player. I think his aggressiveness is gonna help Miami. So I was really impressed there. I was impressed with the corners, and we didn't see a lot of OJ Frederick, but I was impressed with the corners, Xavier Lucas and Ethan O'Connor, particularly O'Connor. Was really impressed with him, a guy who played a lot last year at Washington State. So I think that secondary, I was impressed with the communication. Like there were a couple of busts, and it's kind of hard to tell if it's all ones or was sort of a mixture of ones and twos. There were a couple of busts that happens. There are also a couple of busts on offense. It's camp. It happens, especially when you're mixing and matching guys. But it seemed to be much more under control than last year. I think a big part of Miami's struggles last year, tackling was one post snap. But pre-snap, it was just getting lined up and communication and adjustments to pre-snaps, shifts and motions. That should be better under Corey Heatherman. The defense seems to be simpler. It is a more measured defense, and it created a ton of turnovers last year at Minnesota. And while there are Big Ten defenses with inflated stats at times because of the lack of offense in that league, that Minnesota defense was very good. And did they play the best offenses in the country or in that league? No, but they were still very good because other teams did not hold the teams that Minnesota played to the same production or to the
Well,
same lack of production.
they were in that game against Penn State, who
They
everybody
were.
obviously is picking to,
Yep.
be a national championship contender. And so
They should beat North Carolina to start the year, and like North
yeah,
Carolina wasn't a world beater, but I mean you're right. They were in more games than I think they're than people give them credit for now.
yeah. To me, Roddy, I look at this team, and as much as I've broken things down, I think it really comes down to one thing: can the defensive line, and I know we've got Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor, great edge rushers, solid, really good college players. I think Bain is an NFL guy for sure. They're good, but does that defensive line, all those recruits that Mario stacked, those 5 stars, the Justin Scotts of the world, do those guys take a leap up? Because I think that's what takes Miami from 9-10 wins in the hunt for the ACC championship, playing Clemson, to beating Clemson, going to the national semifinals, maybe even the national championship game. Agree or disagree with me?
Completely agree. Because you have that talent on the defensive line, and when you look at Clemson in particular, like to be better than Clemson, I think the lines of scrimmage have to be better than Clemson. I think the offensive line is in the running with Clemson for one of the best in the conference. The defensive line right now is not. Clemson's defensive line is the best in the conference, period, point blank. Now, that can change if the defensive tackles are good. And I should have mentioned Justin Scott because he popped a couple of times. Look, it's one practice. I'm not sitting here saying he's going to be an All-American this year, but the guy has got juice. He played with great leverage, and he was disruptive in what I saw. So the potential's there, obviously. Now, can he do it snap in, snap out? The other question that I had about the defensive line was depth. What does the depth look like behind Bain and Mesidor? Can Marquise Lightfoot or Armando Blunt, can those guys take a step forward so that you have flexibility in pass rush packages where you bump Mesidor down inside or you bump Ruben Bain down inside or you have one of them kind of walking around as that spinner? The reason we're sort of, I'm going to Penn State again because they're top of mind. We just talked about them.
Right.
One of the reasons Abdul Carter was so effective was because they had Denai Dennis Sutton and Amin Vanover as well. So on third downs, they could search for matchups with Abdul Carter. Now, Ruben Bain doesn't necessarily have to do that. Akeem Mesidor doesn't necessarily have to do that. But when you have that in your tool set, it's something that's really tough. So, Ahmad Moten, Justin Scott on the interior, can those guys be disruptive? And really, I think, I don't want to boil it down to one guy, but if Justin Scott reaches his potential this year, plays really well this year, then that's a big step forward because that type of penetrating interior presence is hard to deal with.
Yeah, it really is. And I just look back to the great Miami teams that won national championships. They always had a dude in the middle of that defense. Every great team that really contends for championships does, right? And that's what Clemson has with Woods and their lineup on that defensive front. Let's talk about the rest of the ACC. And I know we're going to say Clemson's the favorite because they are. They deserve to be, Cade Klubnik, those receivers. They've got the 2 guys up front on defense. Tom Allen's coming over to be defensive. There's every reason in the book to pick Clemson. But I'm going to ask you to give me the reason why Clemson might not win the ACC this year.
Honestly, my number one reason at the end of the year, the one that makes the most sense would be Miami reaching its potential. And look, they would play a great game, I think, if Miami reaches its potential, but that would be the main reason. The Clemson is such a prohibitive favorite because they are good in the areas that you have to be good and good in the areas that don't bust. Offensive line continuity, when you bring back a good offensive line, that offensive line is going to be good again. There's one exception that I can remember over the past few years, and it was Oklahoma State last year. Brought back a whole offensive line wasn't good. What happened? I don't know. But usually when you bring back an offensive line that's good, it's going to be good again. Defensive line, that's especially edge rushers and defensive tackles. The level of TJ Parker and Peter Woods, if those guys stay healthy, they're going to be good. Their floor is so high. So that would be the reason that it has to be like a Miami reaching its potential. I think the other thing that could happen is Clemson doesn't run the ball well. Right. That could be an issue. Now, the offensive line's good. They've recruited well at running back, but they're not proven. I think the other thing that could plague them is maybe some of their run fit stuff from last
Mhm.
year creeps back into this year. I mean, we remember the Louisville game last year where Isaac Brown ran for a bajillion yards against them.
Right.
But other than that, man, like I think Clemson is probably the highest floor team maybe in the country other than Penn State. Like those two teams,
Right.
I feel like have such high floors just because of what they bring back and where they bring it back. So I think the biggest reason that Clemson wouldn't win the league is Miami is really, really good because
Yeah.
they're the only team I think from a talent standpoint that could hang.
Yeah. I obviously I think we both agree Miami and Clemson are 1 and 2, Clemson being 1. But after that, who would you put in your top 5 in terms of other contenders? Because we've seen Miami go in as a favorite or co-favorite and not get the job done, right? They did it at Syracuse last year, blew that 21-point lead when they should have been in the ACC championship game. Who do you feel strongly about outside of those two teams?
I think SMU again is going to be good. The question for SMU is they got a ton to replace on the defensive line. So unless Miami had another mass exodus to Dallas, I think that's certainly a team that is going to have to prove it up front. But I think offensively they'll be really good again. When you look at some other teams, I think I like Louisville a lot. The schedule's really tough for Louisville this year, but I do like Louisville. I like Georgia Tech. And I like Georgia Tech because of the schedule more than not that they're not going to be good, but Georgia Tech does tend to have a letdown against a team that they probably shouldn't. At least they have the past few years. They can get over that, then you feel really good about them, especially if they can keep the quarterback healthy. So those are probably the big ones, and then you kind of get into some of the wild cards, like a North Carolina. Schedule wise, it sets up really well. Coach wise, sets up really well. What's that roster look like? I know the names, but I don't know what those guys are going to look like once the ball kicks off. So I think North Carolina is an interesting one that you could throw in there. Florida State will be interesting just to see. Like they're not in my top 5 at all.
Right.
But Florida State's going to be interesting. And then you look like a Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh started the season really well last year. Offensively, they should be really good. Defensively, that they played a ton of plays last year, and that sort of wore on them over the course of the season. So I think those are the teams. But top 5 would be Clemson number 1, then a gap, Miami 2, then a gap, and then I think you get SMU, Louisville, and Georgia Tech would be the ones that I would throw in there.
Nationally, I mean, you're everywhere these days. You're not just an ACC guy, so you've had a chance to obviously study and see the rest of the country. Everybody feels so good about Penn State. We've talked about them a ton here. But Ohio State, in my book, if Julian Sayin lives up to the expectations, and I know I'm saying he's going to be the starting quarterback. They haven't officially announced that yet, but the guy was the number 1 quarterback in the country just 2 years ago coming out of high school, right? You got Arch Manning over at Tech. There's plenty of other teams that can beat Penn State. Nationally right now, if you were to say a Final Four, what would you predict right now, Roddy?
Oh, it's a good question. I haven't been asked that yet. I would say this is obviously dependent on how the bracket shakes out. I would say Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson would be my 4. I don't trust Penn State. I don't. And James Franklin's 1-16 against top 5 teams in the AP. I mean, I don't know how you can. And they've upgraded the wide receiver room, which is very good. Drew Aller has to be better. I think that's bare minimum. Like he has to play better in big moments. But I mean, Penn State hasn't beaten Ohio State since I believe it's 2016. And I just don't see there's something to Juju like that. I just don't see them being able to overcome that. Now, schedule is friendly. They don't play Oregon. They do get Ohio State, but they don't play. I don't think they play Michigan this year either. So the schedule's pretty friendly. But I think once you get in those situations and you run into a Clemson or an Ohio State or a Texas or an Alabama, then I think Penn State's in trouble. I think Alabama's going to be really good. You look at the offensive line, should be one of the best in the country. You look at the receiver group, it's probably second best in the country. You look at the defense, they've got impact players on all 3 levels of the defense. Ryan Grubb comes back to Kalen DeBoer for his first year at Alabama. He's going to be offensive coordinator after spending a year with the Seattle Seahawks. I think Alabama is going to be really good. Now they got to figure out the quarterback position. Texas offensively should be really good, and a lot of that's because of Arch, but they're going to be able to run the ball really well. And I think that if they dedicate to running the football with that offensive line, that running back room is absolutely stacked. They've got to replace receivers, but they're talented enough where I think that's not going to be an issue. And then you look defensively, they've got maybe the best pass rusher in the country, maybe the best linebacker in the country, and one of the most experienced safeties in the country on the back end. And I think the talent around that's going to be good enough for them to challenge. So I really like Texas. And then Ohio State, a ton to replace on the offense, on the defensive line. But if you can figure out the quarterback position, then I think that offense should be as good as it wants to be honest. A lot of that's because of Jeremiah Smith, but don't forget Cornell Tate's on the other side. So I really like Ohio State as well. And then on the Ohio State piece, because I caveated it with, if they figure out the quarterback position, you did the same thing. I think we all do, which is natural, and we should probably. But like, when has Ohio State not figured out the quarterback position?
Right, exactly.
Like,
every year they've got a dude who just steps in and takes over. It's
always
the same thing.
Going back to like the Jim Tressel era, like they didn't have many whiffs at the quarterback position, and they have not had one since Urban Meyer took over. Through the Ryan Day era, they have not had a whiff at quarterback. Will they have one? Probably. But Clemson had like two, and we were like, oh, it'll never happen again. They'll never whiff. And then we had the DJ Uiagalelei thing. Alabama has had mostly good quarterback play, going back to Jalen Hurts, and probably even before that. You probably go back to Greg McElroy, but it hasn't been to the level of Ohio State. Ohio State's had like guy after guy after guy after guy after guy. And even the guys that aren't like, CJ Stroud, first top 10 picks, they're Will Howards that win you national championships. So
right,
exactly.
When
the bar is set there, I think they're going to figure out the quarterback position just fine.
Yeah, I picked Texas to win the national championship back in January. I said Arch would win the Heisman, and a lot of that is because of what they have on the defensive side of the ball, because obviously they got to replace that whole offensive line. But that was my pick back in January when we had to do those way too early. I don't know if I'm going to stick with it. I got to sit here.
I was going to ask, are you going to stay there?
I don't know. I'm impressed with Alabama as well. I think certainly, and you can never count Kirby Smart out, because Georgia's just those ridiculous classes every single year. I do think an SEC team will climb back to the top of the mountain. It's inevitable. I think the Big Ten's enjoyed a nice little run here. Certainly Ohio State could repeat, but I just don't know that they have enough in the defensive line. That's my one area that I worry about them as well. So I will make some picks here soon in the coming weeks when I do my preseason predictions. But ultimately, when you look at this Miami team, to kind of bring it back home, do you have them in the playoff? Because I do. I think they're going to make the playoff this year.
Yeah, I do. Not only do I think they're good enough, like it's time, and it's been a build. Like you look at teams just in all of sports, there is a progression to getting to the mountain. Typically, like you go from 7 wins to 10 wins to a playoff appearance to a national championship. Maybe they win it this year, but I think they are on that build. They got the right guy at quarterback. I think people forget just how good Carson Beck was 2 years ago when he threw for 3,900 yards. and look, his receivers dropped a lot of passes a year ago, so there was some yards left on the table. And I just think he didn't fit Athens. And there was some friction with the coaching staff, not from him, but from his camp. Like there's a lot of stuff going on. None of that stuff's going on now. He can go out and play ball. And I think that receiving core should be good enough. Will you have a Xavier Restrepo that leads you far and away in receiving? I don't know, but I think that group is good enough. And if JoJo Trader ends up being what we thought he was coming out of high school, maybe he's the bona fide number one guy, which would be great for Miami. But I think their offensive line, their ability to run the football, should get them in the playoff. And the schedule is not daunting. The obviously starting with Notre Dame is not ideal, but you miss Clemson, Florida in September. We'll see, but there's really only one game where I think the team on the other side has as much talent, and it's Notre Dame. Florida will be close, and close enough to make it probably a toss-up game. But this should be a team that should run through its ACC schedule, even with SMU on the road on that schedule, even with Louisville on a Friday night on that schedule. And should be in the college football playoff come December.
ultimately, Mario, I mean, he talked about it at ACC Media Days when he was on stage about how, people just always assumed Miami had talent. And then he brought out the NFL, draft stats and how 6 of the 14 draft picks since he took over were transfers. His own guys, his high school guys, still aren't getting drafted yet. But that's finally going to happen here with Ruben Payne and Maui Noah and some of the other guys that they've got. Um, the way this is building, did you leave Coral Gables, I don't know, feeling better about the whole Mario long-term aspect here at Miami, that at some point he's going to get this thing right and maybe they will win a national championship in the next few years?
Yeah, I left Coral Gables very impressed, very impressed. And not that I saw anything that was groundbreaking, just
Hmm.
the way that unit operates. Like it feels like I went to a couple practices when Coach Richt was there. Went to a couple practices with Manny was there, and I'm not comparing at all, but it feels like the talent level has returned to the level that it should be to win a national championship. And I say that just purely based on like the look. You walk
Hmm.
on the field, the 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 Ohio State team with Chase Young on it was the most impressive collection of athletes I've ever seen in my life. And so now I didn't see those Georgia teams in person with Kirby Smart. I've told that those were equal, if not better than. But you walk out on the field and you see a Clemson or you see an Alabama or last year you see an Ole Miss. Like part of the reason everyone vouched for Ole Miss is because goodness gracious, they looked the part. And when they played
Hmm.
great, they were as good as anybody. But obviously they didn't play great all the time. But you walk out on the field and you see those teams, and there's a look to competing at that level. It's a size, it's a speed, it's an athleticism. It's not just those, it's also length. It's also just sort of the way that you carry yourself. And Miami's got that now. Like Miami's got great size. They've got length at the positions where you need it. They've got an attitude. They've got a work ethic that Mario Cristobal is imparted on this team. So I do think that a lot of things have to go right for you to win a national championship. But I do think that the way this thing is being built, it is built to sustain, because the young guys look the part and they will continue to develop and they will turn into stars and household names. And Mario is doing things. Um, he's doing things the way that you have to win a national championship, which is offensive and great recruiting, but
Hmm.
particularly on the offensive and defensive lines, because you can't portal an offensive line or a defensive line at a national championship level. It just doesn't happen. Has not happened yet, and I don't think it will, because those guys are the guys that fit that build are the 5-star recruits, and the 5-star recruits get paid well enough where they ain't going anywhere.
Right.
So offensive and defensive line recruitment and development, you can supplement with a transfer center, which he's done the past couple seasons, but your tackle's got to be homegrown, and at least one of your guards got to be homegrown. It'd be better if both of them were homegrown, because those are the positions where especially tackle, where like measurables matter. And then defensive line again, because to get the guys at the level that you need to win a championship, those guys don't leave wherever they
Yeah.
start, because they get paid. They get you recruit them, you develop them, they get paid well, and they stay. So yeah, I think this thing's here to stay.
Yeah, I hope so, because they've invested so much money in getting this right. And I think ultimately, Roddy, people don't understand. I mean, it took Jim Harbaugh a long time to get Michigan right.
Yeah,
Even Kirby, and
yeah.
he inherited a program in a much better state with Mark Richt leading things there. I mean, it took Georgia a long time to start winning championships and to get to that elite level. So I think the fact that Mario came up under Nick Saban, saw how it was done in the modern era, and look, let's face it, he's amenable to the transfer portal. A lot of those old school
Mhm.
recruiting guys were like, no, I'm just doing it the highest. No, Mario's adapted. So I those to me are all encouraging signs in terms of the way he thinks and approaches the game. It's a matter of doing it on Saturdays now.
Yeah, could not agree more. And recruiting has never been the criticism for Mario. It's been game management. So
Yeah.
um, we'll see, man. I am very encouraged about this Miami team, not in the U is back kind of way, but in a meat and potatoes. Like this, the steak is there, and you're not
Yeah.
selling me the sizzle of the fajita. Like I'm seeing the red meat of the steak. Yeah, they got to go win. They got to make sure Carson Beck is set up to succeed. But I think that offense is going to operate in a more efficient way under Carson Beck because of his experience and who he's been under. He comes in with a higher level of football understanding than Cam Ward did. So I think from a protection standpoint, he is much more versed in all the different protections that Miami will want to run, whereas Cam Ward came in under a very specific air raid system.
Yeah.
Carson Beck's played under Todd Monken, who's now in the NFL, and Mike Bobo, who was good there with Todd Monken and who has some of those NFL principles. So I think that'll be there. And then he prides himself on his pre-snap operation, like getting the protection right, getting them into the right play, whether it's run or pass or changing from run to pass. He's got an encyclopedia of looks that he's seen and stuff that's worked against it. So I think he may not put up the same numbers as Cam Ward, and this offense may not put up the gross numbers that Cam Ward did, like the yards per or the overall yardage, whatever. But I think it could operate more efficiently. I think you will see many more 2nd down and 4s because you're in the right play on 1st down, and maybe not as many 3rd downs because you're always doing what you need to be doing to be successful.
Yeah, and ultimately you could see more wins and a playoff appearances,
Agreed.
which is what this is all about. And look, he's an NFL quarterback. Carson Beck is going to be an NFL quarterback. He'll be drafted. That's gonna be great for Mario. 2 years in a row, right? Old quarterback you. How long were we talking about how bad the quarterback position was at Miami? Now you've sort of proven and shaken off that disease or whatever of, hey, Miami doesn't produce QBs anymore. Now you got back-to-back guys, and that's going to do great for them on the recruit trail. He's Roddy Jones of ESPN. Roddy, thanks for coming on, brother, and doing this with me and talking Canes, and look forward to seeing you on the broadcast all year.
Of course, man. You're the man. Appreciate the chat, and look forward to doing it again.
All right, brother. Take care.